Will President Trump be able to sway public opinion on the border wall? That is the question of the day as he gears up to give his first Oval Office address on this growing issue. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Sandra Smith.
How you doing? You all right?
Doing well. How you?
It's flying by already, kid. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. The president putting new pressure on Congress to act on border security. He addresses the American people tonight, prime time, 9 o'clock Eastern time. You'll see it live here on the Fox News channel as the government shutdown battle continues to roll on.
I think President Trump is prepared to do what's necessary to address what is a real humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border. For the first time on record, the vast majority of those are families, unaccompanied children, and it simply is overwhelming. We need the Congress to come to the table and work with this president to address this crisis once and for all.
This is not the way to govern. To pound your fist on the table and cause damage to millions of people unless I get my way. It's not what the Constitution says. You know, elections have some consequences. The president couldn't pass his wall when the Republicans controlled the House and the Senate because they knew it was a bad idea.
I don't see how I mean, the Democrats have said they're not going to spend $1, not $1 on a physical boundary. And I don't think President Trump and Mulvaney and my Republican former colleagues, I don't think that they're going to capitulate, to use Lindsey's word, and pass an appropriations bill that doesn't have funding for it.
Kristen Fisher leads our coverage this hour live on the Hill. Kristen, how you doing? Good morning. Day 18 of the shutdown. What are Democrats doing to try and force the president's hand on this?
Well, good morning, Bill. Speaker Pelosi says that Democrats are going to begin passing individual bills this week to try to reopen at least some of the shuttered federal agencies. And they're hoping that that'll put pressure on House Republicans who are growing increasingly concerned about the impact that this shutdown will have to defect. That's part of the reason why the Vice President, Mike Pence, is going to be coming here to Capitol Hill today. He's going to be meeting with House Republicans ahead of the president's address tonight. And he's also made it very clear, the Vice President, in several interviews this morning, that President Trump is seriously considering declaring a full-blown national emergency, and that would allow him to build a wall without congressional approval, a move that Democrats are already vowing to fight.
We would certainly oppose any attempt by the president to make himself a king and a tyrant by saying that he can appropriate money without Congress.
We would challenge it in every single way that we could, in Congress, in the courts, and otherwise.
And, Bill, part of the reason that both Republicans and Democrats are growing increasingly concerned is that this is already the second longest shutdown in U.S. history, and by this Saturday, it'll be the longest ever. Bill?
So as the president gets ready to address the nation, Oval Office, how are Democrats trying to counter that message, Kristen?
Well, as you know, an Oval Office address is one of the most potent and powerful political weapons that any president can use. And so Democrats are saying that if he's being given that platform to push his message, then they should be given a similar opportunity. So last night, Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi put out a statement that says now that the television networks have decided to air the president's address, which, if his past statements are any indication, will be full of malice and misinformation, Democrats must immediately be given equal airtime. And indeed, now this morning, we can confirm that all of the major networks have agreed to air the Democratic response, including Fox News, Bill.
All right, Kristen, thank you. We'll be watching tonight. Thank you so much on the Hill there. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. For more on all this, let's bring in America's A-team. Mark Lauder, former press secretary for Vice President Pence, and RNC spokesperson David Asman, host of Bulls and Bears on the Fox Business Network, and Mo Elathi, former DNC communications director and a Fox News contributor. And good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
What a day, what an evening this is going to be. Mark, obviously, you can give us some different perspective on this, on what to expect.
So you were at the White House yesterday.
I was at the White House.
Counseling the vice president, the president on the rollout.
Well, I was receiving their information more than counseling. But
okay, then what was that conversation about?
It was very pointed. It was a preview of what we're going to see tonight. The president's going to make this about a humanitarian and national security crisis. And when you look at the when you look at the fact that we've got 60,000 people a month coming across our southern border illegally, and according to Doctors Without Borders, 1/3 or nearly 1/3 of the women who are making that journey are being sexually assaulted, how can we not see that as a humanitarian crisis?
So is he going to get anywhere with Democrats? They want to issue a response. David, How does tonight change things?
Well, I think you just changed things by talking to Joe Manchin. I mean, here you had a Democrat. Granted, he's Joe Manchin. He's probably the only Democrat on that side of the political.
An important voice.
But a very important voice. And it sounded like he would, if the president said we have a national emergency on the border for the reasons Mark outlined, we could go ahead with that then in order to open the borders, let the courts deal with it a little later. But that way we could start the process of opening the government again. And it was very interesting. If Manchin can go along with something like that, I would assume that every Republican, including the more liberal Republicans, would also go along with that.
Let's ask Mo.
I'm not sure tonight's going to change very much for one main reason, and that is Oval Office addresses, if you look at the past few administrations, really haven't packed the punch that they used to. The president's base gets fired up. The president's, and this is true of President Obama, Clinton, Bush, the president's opponents' base get fired up, and most Americans kind of tune it out. So I'm not sure it's going to move the needle very much unless he says something dramatically new.
But you don't have to move it that much because there's such a close divide. I think it's 47 to 53, the number of Americans who believe in a wall as opposed to those who don't believe in a wall. So it won't take much to tip the scales in the president's favor.
I think the biggest thing the president could do to tip the scales in his favor and to help the cause is to say, we're not going to hold these federal employees hostage. We are going to reopen the federal government and let us begin tomorrow a real national conversation on immigration reform that is not just about a wall, but includes other forms.
Maybe you get what you're looking for.
Other forms of border security,
too. Mike Pompeo in Cairo said this hour, I saw an early version of the address tonight, he'll make a lot of news. And so you were there, Mark. I mean, is this theory that Joe Manchin and others are talking about, is it possible? You declare a national emergency, you reopen the government, you take the funding that's now on the table, $1.3, $1.6 billion for border security, you move the money from the Army Corps of Engineers to the wall, you accept the court challenge, and you wait for the U.S. Supreme Court to decide it.
And I think it's something the president has said he's willing to do. He would like to negotiate.
Is that what he's going to do?
Well, I don't know exactly
tonight?
what he is going to say tonight, but I'm not going to get ahead of the president, but I know that's something he can do. It's a question of will the Democrats negotiate. He wants to negotiate. They, over the weekend, offered many of the things that Democrats outlined in the negotiations, but they were told, much to what Mo was saying, the first words out of the mouth of many Democratic leaders, their staffers, was, we're not going to negotiate unless you reopen the government. No negotiations unless there's capitulation. You can't negotiate like that.
But still, what you hear time and time again from his base, they do not want him to cave on this issue. Here's Rush Limbaugh on Trump versus the world.
Why does Trump have to go it alone? I'll tell you why Trump has to go it alone, because people like never-Trumpers like Romney and the rest of this crowd, which is sitting here living 25 years in the past or 20 years in the past, they have been rendered obsolete. They have been rendered irrelevant, but it remains a one-man show. Donald Trump against the Democrat Party and the media. We are very fortunate the guy does not cave. We are very fortunate he's willing to put up with this.
Far be it for me to disagree with Rush Limbaugh. He's such a genius when it comes to analyzing political moves. However, sometimes there's a fine line between caving and compromise. 3 weeks ago, if the president had said, no, I'm going to give up a wall for a fence, that would have been a cave. Now he's already suggested that there are things other than a concrete wall that could be used to maintain border security. So it depends how the debate changes. The debate has changed a little bit in that sense, and I think it can continue to do so. And I just want to agree with Mo on one thing. I think the president, beyond the border security, he has to deal with a change in immigration law. Democrats failed to do it when they had everything. Republicans failed to do it when they had everything. It's time to get together, admit that we have a terrible immigration system now based on this stupid lottery system. Let's focus on and do what the Canadians, what the Australians are doing very successfully. Target individuals who want to come to America to work, who have skills that we need. Have a merit-based immigration system. That should be part of the speech
Maybe
tonight.
that was part of the discussions over the weekend. Just go back to what Limbaugh said. Donald Trump against the Democratic Party and the media. Why was there even a debate among these networks as to take this Oval Office address?
Well, if you remember,
he's never done it before. It would be the first one. Under any other president, this is no debate.
Well, actually, it was a debate. If you remember, when Barack Obama was president,
He was
he
was 6 years in.
They should be airing.
Midway through his second term. This should not have even been a question yesterday.
I agree that they should cover it, and I'm actually glad they're giving the Democrats a response as well. I think, one, they did, there were some people out there saying Barack Obama's big immigration speech was declined by the networks because they said it would be too political. There's no sign this is not going to be a political speech, but it is his first Oval Office address, and I believe that the weight of the Oval Office, the power of the presidency, compels the media to cover him. I will say this, though. He has a track record of using these opportunities, not Oval Office, but other addresses, other times he commands everyone's attention to spread misinformation, and that is a struggle a lot of networks
That's the job of us and the other networks.
And that's right.
But here's the point I want to make. I've been making the point here that he doesn't explain enough of these issues to the American people with enough explanation. Oval Office, East Room, Rose Garden, and now we have the opportunity. Tonight, for the first time.
No, that's right. Now, whether or not he actually uses it, well, we'll find out. Whether or not he uses it to spread more misinformation, we'll find out. And I'm looking forward to the media holding him accountable. And the Democrats will have an opportunity to respond. That's the way it should work.
Well, and Joe Manchin wants to hear what he has to say. It sounds, by the way, like Joe Manchin has an idea of what he is going to say. So there seems to be enough information about what he's going to say to intrigue a lot of Democrats. I think they're as much interested in hearing what he has to say as the rest of us.
And having been in the room with him yesterday when he was kind of giving a preview to a few of us, he is going to put a human face on this.
Right.
He is going to talk about the challenges, much to what we were saying a few minutes ago. Our laws are not geared toward the problem. In 2012, 90% of the people coming across the border were single men, or were single adults, I'm sorry. 2/3 now are family units and children. Our laws and our border and customs whole process is not geared to handle it. That's why there is a crisis and why we need to get it done.
He'll declare that tonight as a national crisis based on the humanitarian need and based on the amount of drugs that are coming across.
I can't tell you he's going to declare a national emergency or a national crisis, but I can tell you he's going to identify the crisis. And when we talk about it from a drug standpoint, ICE last year intercepted enough fentanyl coming across our border to kill every man, woman, and child in the United States of America. Think what didn't get through. As we talk about the opioid addiction, is the heroin problem. It's coming across our southern border, and the president's going to be absolutely solid.
We got to run, Mo, quickly.
I was going to say, the wall is not the full answer to border security. There are other technologies. There are other solutions.
Do it all.
Putting more people.
Do it all.
They're not talking about it.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you, David. Thank you, Mark. All right, two big national security members overseas this hour. John Bolton getting a bit of a snub from the Turkish president a short time ago. A face-to-face meeting of the two did not happen. Bolton's wrapping up a two-day trip to Turkey to negotiate the safety of Kurdish forces in Syria. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also traveling in the Middle East. He's on a week-long visit talking to leaders of 8 countries, including those in Cairo, Egypt. Trey Yinks is live in Jerusalem to update us on the movements of both men. Hey, Trey.
Bill, the Trump administration is making a blitz across the Middle East to promote President Trump's shifting foreign policy initiatives. Today, National Security Advisor John Bolton meeting with Turkish leadership to discuss the administration's plan to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria. Earlier in the week, while in Israel, Bolton laid out 2 key conditions for the U.S. withdrawal to occur. First, ISIS must be completely destroyed. Second, the Turkish government must ensure the safety of U.S.-backed Syrian Kurds. Now, while Bolton held talks in Ankara, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan refused to meet with him, instead speaking before Parliament, making clear that Turkey will not pledge to protect the Kurds, a group they view as terrorists. Now, a spokesperson for Erdogan adding Tuesday that Turkey would like to see U.S. bases in Syria emptied and handed over to local elements, that according to Reuters. Meanwhile, President Trump's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo landed in Amman, Jordan today, where he will also discuss the U.S. plan to leave Syria. Additionally, Pompeo will reportedly speak with leaders about ways the United States is looking to pressure Iran amid the country's expanding regional proxies. The Secretary of State heads next to Cairo, Egypt, where he will meet with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Now, Bill, while 2 of the president's key advisors, the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor, are traveling in the Middle East, just last week, President Trump said that Iran can do what they want in Syria, further complicating the messaging of the Trump administration. Bill?
Trey Ying's watching all that from the Middle East. Thank you, sir.
Well, the U.S. and China back to the negotiating table, a second round of trade talks. So will the world's two top economies finally reach a deal? How the stock market is reacting to all the news today.
Also, Amazon is #1. We'll tell you why with the money man Charles Payne coming up next right here. So a second dead body has been found in the L.A. area apartment of prominent Democratic donor Ed Buck. The lawyer says the deceased, found early on Monday, was a longtime friend and the death was accidental. The man's identity and cause of death had not been released. Protesters have been gathering outside of Buck's West Hollywood home demanding he be arrested. This comes about a year and a half after Jamel Moore, a male escort, was also found dead in Buck's apartment. That death was ruled an accidental drug overdose, but investigators are now apparently reviewing that as well. 18 past the hour.
All right. Well, it is an up day for the Dow. 142-point gain there as the U.S. and China continue trade talks in Beijing. A quick check of the big board there. 23,665 on the Dow. Charles Payne, host of Making Money with Charles Payne. No pain today, Charles. Trade talks?
Although it's early.
Is there some progress?
It's cautiously optimistic, and here's the interesting thing. I'll tell you how tenuous it is. But then there's one report, I'm not sure where it came from, that maybe the communique won't be as positive or as upbeat. No one's expecting a deal. I think what everyone really probably would be really good for everyone, particularly in the market, is some sort of, not a joint communique, but at least immediate press releases from both sides. We didn't get that last time. So the things that President Trump said were agreed to, weren't corroborated. There was a lot of negative speculation which hurt the market. So both sides putting out some sort of positive communique, an agreement to get together again in very short order to keep the urgency factor going in this. You don't want it to be like those NATO meetings or those whatever meetings where you get together every 6 months at a lavish, 5-star resort, and you meet and you have this great food and you agree to do it again in 6 months for about 20 years.
Is there some chance that we've been talking about the global economic slowdown in China? U.S. has been okay for now. Is there any sign that that could be changing? Because the president felt like he needed to come out and defend our economy against some analysts and economists that are predicting that we may feel some pain soon. The president responded with this tweet: economic numbers looking really good. Can you imagine if I had long-term zero interest rates to play with like the past administration rather than the rapidly raised normalized rates we have today? That would have been so easy. Still, markets up big since 2016 election.
There were some signs, some technical market signs with bond yields a few months ago that were that historically have been a harbinger of recessions a year and a half later. Then there was the markets more recently on Christmas Eve. That was a very ugly session. The market was open for half a day. We were off 600 points. But I equated that to the Black Monday session of October 19th, 1987, which was the worst single-day session in the history of the market. It did not anticipate a recession, which happened 3 years later. In fact, the Dow was around 2,000 and went on over the next 13 years ago to 11,000. So we are slowing. Growth isn't growing as fast, but I still think we're growing, particularly when you look at on the job side and the consumer side.
Okay, bring it back home. Shutdown day 18. Apparently, there's word of the IRS that there's nobody there to do the job. Is that true?
You still need the Maytag repairman, right? Someone to tweak the computers, right? Get my tech out. They're going to bring enough people back off of furlough, apparently, to make sure that people do get their tax refund. So, and that's good news. A lot of people do really need that. That's a huge day for a whole lot of working people.
I assumed a lot of that was automated.
Yeah, that's what you need the Maytag repairman there. You got to have somebody in there to
the bottom line is the news: tax refunds will go out according to the IRS. Lastly, Amazon is now jumped Microsoft, becoming the most valuable U.S. company for the first time.
Yeah, and this is going to go back and forth. It's trivia, but I will say this. How many people watching right now use Amazon perhaps at least once a week or once a day and do not own the stock? That's the part that bothers me.
This has been your big thing.
It really has.
You like it, buy the stock.
It means that, people want to change their position, their financial position in life. And then they say, I'm not sure what to do, how to do it. And then they use Amazon every single day and never considered owning the stock. And by the way, now it's $1,000 a share. It's too expensive. The $1,000 stocks are the ones that usually go higher. It's the $10 stocks that usually go to 1. So my message is, you know what? It's got the record right now. It's just getting started. If you own this stock over the next 5, 10, 20 years, it could change your life. It could put a kid through college.
You recommend just go out and buy one share? One
share. Why not? If you double your money, you double your money. If you quadruple your money, it doesn't matter. Because people will go out and buy 1,000 shares of a 10-cent stock and feel like, J.P. Morgan or Warren Buffett. And, of course, they take on more risk than they think.
Then they wait a lifetime
for it. So it sounds like
move.
a strong buy recommendation on Amazon.
It's a very strong buy recommendation. If you're 35, 40 years old, looking to maybe change your life and put a kid or two through college, I think you'd.
Wow.
I don't see a lot of stocks that are better than that one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
See you at 2 o'clock on Fox Business.
A lot to talk about.
Well done, man.
Thank you.
You rattled right through it. Thank you, sir. Issue of the border wall now hitting home for one Tennessee couple. Listen to their story.
The wall will stop some people from just coming over, but I think that there needs to be something in place that's going to
be a deterrent.
Well, the parents of Pierce Corcoran now talking after police say he was killed in a car crash by a suspected illegal immigrant. The rest of their story in a moment.
Plus, California's new governor vowing to offer, quote, sanctuary for all throughout the entire state during his inaugural address. And former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee will join us with his reaction to both of those stories.
There's an administration in Washington that is clearly hostile to California values and California's interests. We will offer an alternative to the corruption and the incompetence in the White House.
Fox News Alert: California will offer, quote, sanctuary to all who seek it. That promise from new Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom in his inaugural address Monday. Though he did avoid mentioning President Trump by name, much of the speech was a direct attack on the president and his immigration policies. William Lajeunesse is live in Los Angeles with more on this. William.
Well, Sandra, Newsom took office Monday as California's 40th governor, pledging to challenge President Trump and what he called, quote, corruption and incompetence in the White House.
There are powerful forces arrayed against us, not just politicians in Washington, but drug companies that gouge Californians with sky-high prices. But here in California, we have the power to stand up to them, and we will.
Newsom is a liberal whose promises some fear will bankrupt a state with already the highest combined tax rate. He favors single-payer health care, universal preschool, and savings accounts for every 5-year-old, a Marshall Plan to create more public housing to end homelessness, and a state bank to provide low-interest loans. Within hours of taking office, Newsom signed an executive order allowing the state to buy prescription drugs for all 13 million poor Californians and let private businesses join that buying pool. He also reinstated the individual mandate that all Californians carry health insurance. That's a direct conflict, of course, with Washington, which removed the individual mandate. And Newsom also signed an executive order expanding free or subsidized health care for all illegal immigrants under age 26. More progressive than former Governor Jerry Brown, Newsom opposes a wall, favors sanctuary cities, and yesterday called President Trump hostile to California values and interests.
We face a gulf between the rich and everyone else. And it's not just inequality of wealth, it's inequality of opportunity.
So on climate change, immigration, health care, education, expect California to fight Washington. Sandra, paying for the priorities? It's a problem considering 1% of Californians already pay 45% of taxes. There are talk that he may impose a tax on services to pay for it. Back to you.
William Lajeunesse, thank you.
Want to get some reaction now? Mike Huckabee is here, former Arkansas governor, Fox News contributor. How you doing, Gov? Good morning to you, and thanks for coming back on our program. Sanctuary to all. What do you think about that in California?
Well, he's getting some new hats made that will say MCVA, Make California Venezuela Again. I just can't get over how he doesn't understand why so many people are moving away from California. The latest is if you rent a U-Haul truck and you get it in California and you take it to Texas, it costs a little over $2,000. If you get that exact same truck and drive it from Texas to California, it's less than half that because you're doing U-Haul a favor, taking an empty truck back so some other California family can get the heck out of there. Why is that? Because he's more interested in providing sanctuary for illegal people who will come and murder a police officer in cold blood, like Officer Singh, than he is protecting California citizens like Kate Steinle. It's absolutely outrageous, and I don't know what it is that even is in the water that he drinks that would make him think that's a great way to lead a state.
Also want to get your response to the story we just shared about the family who lost their young son, 22-year-old man, to a suspected illegal immigrant. Here's the father responding to that.
We are not a hating people. We love and we rally behind people, the underdogs that come here to America and succeed legally. And that's what we want. I don't understand why that's so hard. And this shouldn't be a political left-wing, right-wing. It should just be America. He's been here for 14 years, and he made no attempt at all to become a legal, law-abiding citizen.
Devastating story there in Knoxville. That was the fire captain who lost his son to Francisco Eduardo, 44 years old. He veered into oncoming traffic, smashed into his Honda Civic, and his son was killed as a result.
Two observations, Sandra. One is the tragedy of the loss of this totally innocent young American. The other is the remarkable just attitude of this family, who recognize that immigration is what made America a great country, but legal immigration, where people came here because they wanted to be part of this country, they wanted to assimilate, they wanted to contribute, they wanted to be a part of the American dream. He recognizes that even in the midst of his own personal loss and tragedy. And I think that's where most Americans are. But most Americans don't believe that you just open the doors, the walls, throw away the key and say, come on in. It doesn't matter who you are, why you're here. And when I hear Gavin Newsom talk about drug companies, the biggest drug company in the world are the Mexican cartels, that he's apparently willing to open the gates to and say, come on into California. That just doesn't make any sense for people whose brains register double digits.
We love and rally behind the people who are underdogs who come here to America and succeed legally.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we do. There's so many great people in this country who came with nothing, and they have made something of themselves because of America's great opportunities. This is a wonderful country, and we celebrate that. But we won't have much to celebrate if we make it so that we become a haven for people who don't want to abide by rules, abide by the law, and contribute something to the rest of society. That defies what America is about.
Meanwhile, we await the president's address on this issue. It's happening tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, Governor. High expectations for that. Ahead of that, however, here's a top Democrat, Jerry Nadler, saying he expects the president to lie in that address.
I expect the president to lie to the American people. Why do I expect this? Because he has been lying to the American people, and his spokespeople continue lying to the American people. Just yesterday, his press secretary said in an interview with Chris Wallace that 4,000 terrorists had crossed the border. Chris Wallace pointed out that they had all been apprehended at airports, none at the border. There is no security crisis at the border.
Is it helpful to have a leader of the Democratic Party say that in advance of this?
Of course not, but I think we've given up any hope that some of the so-called leaders of the Democratic Party are interested in solving some real problems, and there are problems at the border, and if he doesn't understand that, he should go down there and take a look firsthand. I've been there. I think you've been there. To say that there's not a problem, everything is fine, take all those barriers away from Congress. Let everybody come in. Take the magnetometers away from the doors. Why don't we do that? Because we feel like we've got to protect members of Congress. Why don't we protect the rest of America at least to a degree as much as we do the members of Congress? What hypocrisy, what insanity. And I hope the president can really speak to the hearts of the American people, not to their heads, but to their hearts tonight, and explain to them that this is not
lay it
really
out
his wall, it's theirs.
10 years ago, you won in Iowa because of your ability to communicate. How does he communicate tonight? Frame it for us.
I think Bill, I think the most important thing the president does tonight is to personalize what illegal immigration is doing. The stories of Officer Singh, this family from Tennessee, are great examples of why this is important. But I also think that he's got to make sure that he reminds people that they elected him to be their voice. It's not about his voice and what matters to him. It's about what matters to the American people. That wall does not belong to Donald Trump. It belongs to America. It belongs to people like that family, so that people who come here come legally. And if they do come, they come with an intent to create a better America, not to destroy the one that many of us have worked hard to create.
It's going to be a very interesting setting. Oval Office,
yes,
prime time, 9 o'clock Eastern time. Thank you, Governor. Come on back. Mike Huckabee, thanks.
Thanks, Governor.
Look forward to it.
All right, well, foul language and hateful rhetoric sparking outrage in the halls of Congress, the growing battle on Capitol Hill over decorum, civility, and the First Amendment. Our A-team will come back and join us on that next.
My colleague, Congressman Hank Johnson, had this to say recently.
Much like Hitler took over the Nazi Party, Trump has taken over the Republican Party.
Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg now missing a second day of arguments. She continues to recuperate from cancer surgery on her left lung. She's 85. She missed arguments yesterday for the first time in her 25-year tenure on the High Court that she had ever missed oral arguments. So we hope for her recovery in Washington, D.C. All right, 42 minutes now past the hour.
To me, there are lines. There's a First Amendment, and I fully respect that, but the First Amendment doesn't allow you to say fire in a movie theater. There are limits, and when you incite violence against someone else, that's not the way we act in this country. And so if you want to debate the merits, then go ahead. That's what's great about this country.
Well, the new reaction from House Minority Whip Steve Scalise amid the growing debate over decorum on Capitol Hill. Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib in the spotlight yet again this morning. This on the heels of her profanity-laced remarks about impeaching President Trump. Our A-team is back. Mark Lauder, David Asman, and Mo Alethe. Good to have you all here this morning. Mark, if you could, where do you fall in this decorum debate in Washington at this moment?
I am very much opposed to the language that is used, but it's also a First Amendment right. I'm more concerned about the actual policies and the things that they are actually espousing, whether it's hatred toward Israel and anti-Israel, or it's just gone so far over the edge, and it's taking our country to a dangerous place.
David?
You know who talks about decorum in a great way is Peggy Noonan, the Wall Street Journal columnist, and she says it's not nothing. I mean, that's the headline of a New York Times piece. Rashida Tlaib said nothing wrong. Well, yes, she did. She said something wrong, something that affects the decorum of the nation. I take the subways in New York to work and back home again. This morning I was taking the subway. There were these 14-year-old girls, 13, 14-year-old girls, throwing the F-bomb around like crazy. I mean, they're young ladies, and they're throwing the whole sense of decorum, the whole sense of the way we deal with each other is a very important part of what makes America great and what makes the First Amendment possible. You have to have decorum in order to have a good First Amendment debate, and unfortunately that process is falling apart. And of course, both sides are to blame. There's enough blame to go around, but it's got to start. This woman, Tlaib, is a role model. Whether she likes it or not, she's a role model to those 13 and 14-year-old girls in the subway. She's got to behave like one.
It's interesting you pointing out the fact that this is a woman using these words, because Michelle Goldberg in the New York Times wrote a piece, Rashida Tlaib said nothing wrong for her language because she's how women politicians can't win, Mo. Is that the case? Is it about her being a woman?
Look, I think there are two issues. One, I do think women politicians are judged differently. Ask Hillary Clinton, ask Michelle Bachmann or Sarah Palin. I think that is true. But that's a separate conversation from this in a lot of ways. Much, like Mark did. I did a lot of, I used language I shouldn't have used during that time. I said, I vilified my opponents the way I did for far too long. Now that I'm out of the game, I've sort of made it my mission in my day job to talk about how to restore civility to politics, because we can't keep vilifying one another. It's one of the things I dislike the most about the president, and Democrats are not going to be served well by Trumpifying, by being more like the president.
It's a very interesting message, Mo. I just got some breaking news right now. We're learning that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer will deliver the joint response to the Oval Office address tonight in prime time, so that's just in right now. Mo, just to pick up on that, this is Hank Johnson. He's a Democrat from Georgia, represents DeKalb County, northeast of Atlanta. He was speaking to the NAACP the other day, and this is how he characterized Trump's, well, he called Trump Hitler, and then he characterized Trump's supporters and voters the following way.
Donald Trump supporters are older, less educated. Many are dying from alcoholism, drug overdoses, liver disease, or simply a broken heart caused by economic despair.
So you have that, and you have a response a moment ago from the AJC in Atlanta. I wanted to make the point that our democracy is under severe threat. Well, that's not what he said. He went right after the people who voted for Donald Trump, of which there were, was it 63 million?
This is not new. And it's sad. I mean, let's remember that, you know, President Obama thought that Republicans clung to their guns and their Bible. Hillary Clinton thought they were deplorable. And this is a continuation of a theme. And I think it's alienating so many people. And even to Mo's point from earlier, we've got to learn to agree or disagree, but still be agreeable when we are doing it. There's got to be some civility. People I disagree with politically doesn't make them bad people. It just means that we have to disagree.
And there were Democrats who voted for Donald Trump. I mean, that Democrat congressman should know that and recognize that. And if any team is going to win the next election, they're not going to do it just by their own party. They're going to have to do it from crossovers. The independents in the middle and some of the Democrats who vote Republican and vice versa are going to need to step up to the plate, because they're going to lose based on that kind of attitude. So it's not only irresponsible to say the things that he said, but it's hurting his own party.
All right, well, to the Democrat on the table, further response, if you will, to the news we just received from Nancy Pelosi's office that she and Chuck Schumer will be delivering the response to the president's address at 9 p.m. tonight. At the conclusion of his remarks, we will hear from them.
Yeah, I think that's good, and that's what we should be doing, hearing both sides tonight in order to end this shutdown. And so I'm glad that the Speaker and the Minority Leader in the Senate are gonna offer that, and I think that's good for discourse. And back to the discourse issue, right? I mean, you look at my Twitter feed as soon as I come off the air, and there's going to be a lot of stuff written there about me that is as offensive or worse. You look at the way there has been violence during some contentious issues. I remember during ACA, Democratic Party headquarters around the country being vandalized or worse.
ACA's Obamacare.
During the Obamacare debate. And we saw something recently against a couple of Republican Party headquarters around the country.
Not to mention Congressman Scalise.
Not to mention Congressman Scalise. Look, we all need to chill right now. We all need to chill. This isn't just a problem with the people in Washington. They are a symptom of a bigger problem right now. I don't think we should be insulting voters, but voters play a role in this too. And they have to demand better rhetoric. And what we're seeing right now is a polarization where voters are demanding their team to be even angrier. And so politicians are responding to that. And so I hope voters can start demanding from political leaders on both parties, chill out. This is not what we sent you there for.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you, David. Thank you, Mark. We'll see you later tonight. Thank you, gentlemen. Who had Alabama last night?
Not me.
Oh, my. They're rolling over the tide. Bama on the short end of a National Football Championship, and Clemson, man, did they come to play. Jared Max breaks down football history. Coming up next.
Back there taking hits.